Kansas race last weekend was the most exciting one in recent years. Of course, it was not without its frustrations with tire issues and pit road penalties, but I'm hoping the excitement continues when we go to Texas Motor Speedway for the All-Star race with a much simpler format. But first, we gotta talk about the dilemma at 2311 Racing. This week's episode of Above the Yellow Line was delivered to you by DoorDash. Get more to your door with DoorDash. Make sure you use the promo code NASCAR30 and get 30% off your first order. This offer only available on new DoorDash accounts. Hey race fans, it's Taylor, and welcome back to Above the Yellow Line, the show where we talk all about the NASCAR Cup Series. There was chaos at Kansas. Literally, I can't think of any other word that describes this race better. It was exciting, don't get me wrong, but I swear every single driver had an issue. Nobody was safe. So we'll talk about the results of that race. We'll also talk about my predictions for the All-Star race, who gets in, who doesn't, who wins the whole thing. But now, let's get to our results of the Advent Health 400 at Kansas Speedway, starting with your winner. He was fastest in practice, qualified P5. He was the one to beat on Sunday. Kurt Busch, leading 116 laps, captured his first stage win of the season and his first victory of the season for 2311 Racing in the Jumpman car. Kurt Busch has now won with 4 different manufacturers and 5 different teams in his Cup Series career. This also makes 19 wins out of his 22 seasons in the Cup Series, which is very impressive. Of course, this weekend was not an easy win for Kurt Busch. He had to face off against the Kyles, Kyle Larson, defending champion, and his brother Kyle Busch, who actually won this race last year. A very hard fight, and of course, like I said, one of the cars to beat for this weekend. So congrats to the 45 team on the W, a much-needed win for 2311 Racing. Now looking at the rest of the top 10, you'll notice that all the Toyotas finished within the top 10. A huge weekend for Toyota Racing. They've struggled this season so far, so having cars that were stellar this weekend that were there to win, very exciting for me to see. So let's go down the rest of your top 10 right now. In second place, we have Kyle Larson. This makes his third top 3 finish of the season, and this is very good because, as you remember, at Darlington, he did not finish the race due to engine failure, so it was good to have him have a rebound weekend at Kansas. In third place, we have Kyle Busch. He had a contending car for the lead. He only led 18 laps, but it was good to see him finish in the top 3 as well. He was my race pick for the weekend, so I was very happy with him finishing in third place. Speaking of Kyle Busch, right behind him are the rest of his teammates. In P4 was Denny Hamlin, fighting back from multiple pit road penalties. Then in P5, we have Christopher Bell, who had a tire go down on lap 62 that sent him to the back of the pack, rebounded very nicely from that. And then P6, we have Martin Truex Jr. 8th place, we gotta talk about this. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., this is his 3rd consecutive top 10 of the season. Of course, at Dover, he finished P2. We look at Darlington, he finished in 8th place. And then this weekend, of course, at Kansas, he finished in 8th as well. Gotta keep up that momentum. Very good to see Ricky Stenhouse Jr. doing well so far this season. Then in 9th, we have Alex Bowman, and 10th, Bubba Wallace. We're going to talk about Bubba Wallace when we go down the line, so more on that later, but rebounded after an issue on pit road to finish in 10th place. Very good day for the Toyotas, like I said, really good to see that. But now let's look at our top contenders outside the top 10 and see how they finished. Austin Cindric finished in 11th position, first top 15 since Martinsville. Another driver I want to look at is Brad Keselowski, finishing in 14th. Same can be said for Keselowski, except his last top 15 came at Bristol. Something important to note, 16th and 17th were best friends Byron and Logano. They finished next to each other, but no retaliation on the menu this weekend. And finally, Chase Elliott finishing in 29th position. Elliott's car could kind of go wherever he wanted it to go. It carried a lot of speed. For me, it was a top 5 car, maybe not a race-winning car, but good nevertheless. Unfortunately, though, with a pit road penalty and then a tire going down, the left rear tire going down later in the race, it didn't end up being a good day for Chase Elliott. So unfortunate for that team, but at least at the beginning of the race, things looked to be decent. So we talked about our results for the race. Let's talk about the point standings now following the Advent Health 400. Kurt Busch obviously locks himself into the playoffs, which is good news for that team, but very bad news for the guys who are around the bubble and below the bubble as they fall farther in the point standings. Austin Dillon is now below the cutoff line, minus 11 to the good. Almirola is now plus 11 to the good, so there's a bit of a gap there now as opposed to the plus 1, minus 1 we saw between Austin Dillon and Reddick last week. Not a lot has changed between the guys that have won races yet, but I'll go through the list anyways. Byron is in first in playoff points, then Chastain, Elliott, Hamlin, Kyle Busch, Logano, Bowman, Larson, Briscoe, Kurt Busch, and Cindric. Then right below them is Ryan Blaney without a win, but plus 112 to the good. Below him is Truex with 89 points. Then Bell plus 48, Harvick plus 24, and like I talked about, Almirola plus 11. Looking at the points, you might see some guys that have taken an L after this weekend, so let's just transition into our MVP Performance of the Week presented by SRI Performance. Of course, as always, like I always say, let's start on the negative side with this week's LVP. It is a three-way tie. I couldn't choose just one driver because a lot of drivers, like I said, had issues this weekend, so I couldn't just give this to one contender. I have to give it to three, and all these guys are below the cutoff line. For me, those drivers are Daniel Suarez, Tyler Reddick, and Eric Jones. If you look at last week's point standings, Reddick was -1 to the good, now he's -22. Jones was -5 to the good, now he's -32. And the worst of all, Daniel Suarez, -18 to the good, now he is -49, digging himself a deeper hole in the playoff standings. On track, Daniel Suarez was easily a top 5 car in my opinion at the beginning of the race, running on par with teammate Ross Chastain, and then he spun out, wasn't able to recover, and then we talk about Tyler Reddick, had a tire go down in the race, and then Eric Jones, major issue on pit road. We're going to talk about that though when we talk about all the tire issues, but was stuck on pit road for about over 10 minutes trying to get the tire off of the car. So not a good day for them, not the day that they needed at all as they slipped farther in the playoff standings. So this week, Suarez, Reddick, and Jones are my LVPs. Now for the SRI Performance MVP of the week. This is no contest. It's Kurt Busch, you guys. Come on. This is the morale boost that 2311 Racing needed. Plus, Kurt was the dominant car all day, leading more than double the laps that any other driver did on Sunday. So congrats to the 45 team of Kurt Busch. You are this week's SRI Performance MVP of the week. Usually at this point in the show, we go to our race rating. I'm going to skip that for now. We're going to come back to it. But we got to go down the line, presented by PFC Brakes, talking about the key moments from this week, and they all come from the race at Kansas. So that's why I was like, let's just insert this part of the show right here. And let's start off by talking about the tire issues this weekend, the multiple drivers that were plagued by the tire issues. Let's kind of break that down and kind of discuss what might have been happening. Before the race, at practice, this is where all the tire issues started to appear. 5 teams were plagued by tire failures, most notably Joey Logano and Chris Buescher had to go to backup cars because the tire failure sent them into the wall, damage to their cars, obviously couldn't be raceable. But during the race, the most notable one, like I mentioned with the LVPs, was Eric Jones. Like I said, the lug nut was stuck on the car. They could not get the tire off, so they ended up having to actually cut it to access the lug nut. Justin Fielder, the rear tire changer of Eric Jones, posted a tweet after the race and said, "There was no thread, it skipped off the cap on the stop before and got the lug nut too tight." They also said that they've had this issue before, but it was never this bad. And I kid you not, everyone on pit road was immersed in this issue. Everyone was watching. I'm sure everyone on track was probably asking the same question. Are we going to have this issue? The fans at home, at least me, I was invested in this issue because it's something that we have never seen before. It was a 10-minute saga, like I said, and everyone was just watching this 43 team, trying to see if they could figure it out. So at least other teams know what to do in the future, but this is not good at all for this tire. And it's something that other teams have said that they've struggled with too. Getting that lug nut off has not been easy, and of course, as we've also seen, getting it tight is not easy either. Besides the lug nut issue, we actually had pure tire failures this weekend at Kansas, like I said, in practice. Also during the race, drivers like Chase Elliott, Daniel Suarez, Tyler Reddick, Christopher Bell, many more drivers that I'm not listing off right now had tires go down on them during the race. And I was curious. I had no clue why this was happening, so I enlisted the help of Brian Murphy. He sent me a tweet from Bob Pockras, so thank you to Bob Pockras and Brian Murphy for helping me educate myself on this issue of what we might have been seeing happening with these tires. This is a tweet that Bob Pockras posted days prior to the race from Goodyear Tires, saying, "A lot has changed for NASCAR Cup teams with the new next-gen car. One of the more significant impacts has been the amount of loading on the left rear corner of the car. There are 2 basic reasons for that. The independent rear suspension on the car and the aerodynamic balance is shifted more to the rear of the car. Because of that, teams need to be more aware of the air pressure levels in the left rear tire. Goodyear has responded to that by recommending 2 psi more in the left rear tire than the left front at many tracks this season, including this week's stop at Kansas Speedway. Quote, the amount of air pressure in the tire should directly correlate to the amount of load in the corner of the car, said Greg Strucker, Goodyear's director of racing. If the amount of load increases, like it has on the left rear of this next-gen car, you need to increase the load carrying capability in that tire, which is done via air pressure. If you run below our recommended pressures, the tire can over-deflect, sustaining damage and result in an air loss." So when a tire is over-deflected, from my understanding that means it's under-inflated, which leads to, you guessed it, tire damage. This causes the tire to overheat, which causes tread separation, blowout, even tire wear, and a shorter lifespan of the tire, which is exactly what we saw at Kansas this weekend. Regardless, these teams have a lot of work to do to try to figure out this tire with the Gen 7 car. If you guys have any other theories as to why the tires might be acting up on these cars, let me know in the comments below. So we talked about the tire problems. Let's talk about the pit road problems. A lot of those happened because of the tires, notably Kyle Busch, Ross Chastain. Kyle Busch had issues getting his tire off. Slow pit stop to make up for that, though. He sped on pit road, giving him a speeding penalty, sent him to the back of the pack to start stage 3. If we're talking about ones that did not involve tire issues, we got Kevin Harvick, Martin Truex Jr. speeding, entering pit road, and then Denny Hamlin and Chase Elliott both had interferences with equipment, which sent them to the back of the pack as well. But the main topic of discussion is the dilemma with 23XI Racing, most particularly the crew of Bubba Wallace. With 70 laps to go, there was a caution for Chase Elliott, which sent most of the field to pit road, and this is where things just went from great for Bubba Wallace to worse, because if you remember, Bubba Wallace at this point in the race was in the top 5. He raced himself to the top 5, and at the beginning of the race, he started in 24th position. 22 laps into the race, he got himself to P13, which was very impressive. A car who could have contended for the win. Of course, on this pit stop, though, his crew lost a tire, went rogue. Alex Bowman actually punted the tire on pit road. Luckily, nobody was injured. All the crew, everyone was fine. But this sent Bubba Wallace to the back of the pack with a uncontrolled tire penalty. Here's the dilemma I see. Of course, while they're going to be celebrating Kurt Busch's win at 23XI Racing, rightfully so, because it is a big win for the team, they're also going to be minimizing, I think, the issue that we saw with Bubba Wallace this weekend. I'm not saying that it's going to go totally under the rug, but it's not going to be the main focus, which I think it has to be. Now, Kurt Busch brought on to 23XI Racing because he's a winner. That's what he knows how to do. They also know that Bubba Wallace probably needed a teammate, a veteran teammate to learn from, get some pointers from, so it was a good move over there. But for Bubba Wallace, those winning opportunities are becoming few and far between because his crew keeps screwing him over, for a lack of better words. So in my opinion, the 23 crew needs a change, and I've talked about this with other teams like Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney, so it's not a new conversation, but for me personally, there's much more at stake for Bubba Wallace. With the spotlight he is under and all the outside eyes looking at him, wanting him to fail for reasons because of who he is and what he stands for, which I know is totally wrong, but that's the reality of the situation. There is a lot more pressure on Bubba Wallace. Is it right? Like I said, no, but it's going to make it a little bit harder for him to win, because I can imagine it's got to be difficult to get that outside pressure out of your head once you step into the car. Add in a lot of bad luck for 23XI Racing, especially at Darlington, where both drivers were racing inside the top 10, then were wrecked out on lap 261, taking away their top 10 finish. So adding in all of this together, it doesn't create a formula for success, but those were out of your control. The outside pressure, the crashes, those are out of their control. What's in their control, though, is the pit crew, and that's why this needs to change. If you can control some aspect of success, it's with the pit crew. Denny Hamlin said post-race that as an organization, they keep failing them, which them being Kurt Busch and Bubba Wallace. He also hinted more specifically at Bubba Wallace, saying the crew failed him yet again. So, of course, things need to change, and if we look back earlier in the season, especially at COTA, when there was another tire issue for Bubba Wallace, of course, this wasn't necessarily with a tire being lost on pit road, but on the track, they didn't get the lug tight enough, and of course, Stage 2, Bubba Wallace finished inside the top 10. The pit stop happened right after that, like where it actually mattered the most. Of course, as we have pit stops later in the race, that's where they start to matter. You make a mistake there, it's very hard to make those up. So a day that could have been very good for Bubba Wallace, again, kind of tarnished by his crew. I know a race team is like a family, and to make these changes, it's got to be really tough, but in 23XI Racing's second season, you want to lay a very strong foundation. They're at a time where they can still make these changes to have a successful future. If you lay a strong foundation now, you're going to build on the success over and over, and that's what they have to do. And it's early enough in the season, too, to make those changes. They could actually pull a Matt DiBenedetto here. Remember, last season, things weren't going so well, so they made a crew chief change during the All-Star race for the foreseeable future of that season. And I think if they want to make a change, they got to do it now for the All-Star race. There is nothing to be lost. It's a non-points paying race, and it's a way to kind of figure out the new choreography of the team without any real penalties. So I think if they got to make a change, they got to make it now. Regardless, they're going to have to if they want Bubba Wallace to succeed in the 23 car. So that was Down the Line, presented by PFC Brakes. Now it's time to go on to our race rating above or below the yellow line. As always, I like to start with what you all thought about this race from a Twitter poll. So a lot of you said this race was great. Actually, 66% of you said this race was a great race, 24% said good, 6% said okay, and 4% said bad. Kansas Mizzou said, I was there. It was a good race with a lot of action in the closing laps. Hunter King said, really want to call it great, but hard to put it there with these ongoing tire issues. Feel like that's the only thing to be upset about here, even with that solid racing all day long. James said, Kansas is underrated racetrack, puts on good races every year, a lot of racing side by side. I'm glad they had this race in the playoffs. Alex was also at the track and said, might be the best race of the season so far for me. Finally, J-Dub said, Kansas has been putting together really good races lately, and Kurt was on a mission today. Great finish. So those were your thoughts, and here are my thoughts. This is the first time this season I actually thought the broadcast didn't take precedent over the actual racing. It blended in really nice, and how a sports broadcast should be is not the entertainment taking place over the actual action that we see on the field, on the track, on the court, wherever it is. So it was very refreshing. Obviously, there was some talking over each other on the broadcast side of things. There was some things that we obviously missed seeing, and the broadcast had to explain it. I get that, but it actually felt solid. I felt like I was at the track watching the race instead of trying to listen to the commentators, so that was very refreshing for me to see. In terms of the racing, it was exciting. There was a lot of great battles all day long, and especially at the end of the race between Kyle Larson and Kurt Busch trying to battle it out for the win. It was action-packed nonstop through the entirety of the race. So for that reason, I gotta rate this one really high. Obviously, I know some tire issues played into effect. That's gonna lower my score a little bit. But so far, this is the highest rating I'm giving for a race this season, with a 92% for the Advent Health 400, making this above the yellow line. So we've closed out our recap of the Advent Health 400. Now it's time to preview this weekend's race at Texas Motor Speedway, the All-Star Race, with your driver stats presented by Rhino.co. So your driver stats for the All-Star Race. The last driver to win the All-Star Race was Kyle Larson last year. The active driver with the most All-Star wins is Kevin Harvick and Kyle Larson, tied with 2 apiece. Going back to your normal track stats, though, the team with the most track wins is Hendrick Motorsports with 10 wins apiece. Finally, the wins by manufacturer. Chevrolet has 20, Ford has 12, and Toyota has 2. All this information from RacingReference.com. So we didn't have track facts for a reason. That's because we have an all-star format to break down and kind of explain a little bit here. Much less complicated than what we saw last year with the 6 stages, the random field inverts, and the random picks, and the weird concert in between the races. That nothing like that this year. It's much more streamlined. So let's go through it together, starting with practice and qualifying. Starting with practice. Practice 1 is for the guys that need to race their way into the All-Star Race with the All-Star Open. That is 15 to 20 minutes for those cars. Second practice, practice number 2, is for the guys already in the All-Star Race. That is 15 to 20 minutes as well. Now on to qualifying. Of course, this is only for our guys who are already in the main event. Round 1 will be single car qualifying, your classic, just like we like it. They'll move into the qualifying rounds, and then the top 8 fastest will go into a head-to-head pit stop challenge to win the pole. This is where things get a little different. They're going to put crews head-to-head. The guys that finish in the top 8 of qualifying, one crew will face off against another with a 4-tire pit stop. And of course, after those pit stops, they have to leave onto the track without speeding. The guy who has the fastest pit stop will move on to the next round until we're down to our last 2 contenders for the pole. So that's pretty different. I don't know if it actually adds anything kind of exciting or spectacular to qualifying, in my opinion. I also don't know if it's going to give the guy who's actually the fastest the pole. So I don't really feel either way about it. Let me know what you think in the comments below about this addition to qualifying, but I'm not opposed, but I'm also not super thrilled about it. There are still a few drivers that have to race their way in, and they are the following drivers. It's easier to name the drivers who haven't made it in than the drivers that have. So we're going to start this with Austin Dillon, Corey LaJoie, Tyler Reddick, Chris Buescher, Harrison Burton, Justin Haley, Todd Gilliland, Cole Custer, Ty Dillon, Eric Jones, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Cody Ware, Landon Castle, BJ McLeod, and Daniel Suarez. These drivers will face off in 3 stages, the first stage being 20 laps. The guy who wins that stage will make it to the main event. Same goes for stage 2, also 20 laps. The guy who wins that will make it into the main event. Also for stage 3, this time it's only 10 laps. The winner of that will make it into the main event. As soon as they've won their stage, they'll be taken out of the race so they don't have to damage their car anymore, but then this will mean 3 guys are in the main event. But then we're also forgetting about the fan vote. Whoever wins the fan vote out of those drivers who have not yet made it into the main All-Star event will also make it into the main event. So that means 4 drivers from the All-Star Open are going to make it into the All-Star Race. All right, this is the one we're going to have to look at together because this is where things get a little more complicated, but not exactly totally complicated. Now, a reminder, to make it into the normal All-Star Race, you have to have met these qualifications. You have to have won a race in 2021 or so far in 2022, being a full-time driver. You also have to have a championship in the past in the NASCAR Cup Series being a full-time driver, and you have had to have won a previous All-Star race now being a full-time driver. So those are your stipulations for making it into the main event. So let's start by breaking this down with Stage 1. Big difference from last year, there are only 4 stages. Stages 1, 2, and 3 are all 25 laps each. The Stage 1 winner will start on the pole in the final stage as long as they finish 15th or better in Stages 2 and 3. Same principle applies for Stage 2. Stage 2 winner will start in P2 in the final stage as long as they finish 15th or better in Stage 3. And then in between Stages 2 and 3, we're going to take a break to have the Pit Stop Challenge. I'm so glad we're actually taking a break for it this year because last year, if you remember, we did it during green flag stops and I just didn't like that at all. So we're taking a break to recognize the competition, recognize the pit crew, so I'm very, very happy about that. Here's how it's going to work. Of course, all the teams will make their way to pit road during this mandatory break, and the team with the fastest pit stop will win P4 in the final stage, and of course, their pit crew will win the Pit Crew Challenge. On to Stage 3, though. Stage 3 is pretty self-explanatory. It's 25 laps, and the Stage 3 winner will start 3rd in the final stage. The final stage is 50 laps. We all know where the top 4 starting contenders come from, and the winner, of course, gets the $1 million. The only thing I don't like about this format is in the final stage, if no natural caution happens in lap 15 to 25 of the final stage, NASCAR is going to pull what they call a all-star caution. And maybe this is to check tire wear, especially after Kansas. I really don't know why this has to happen. It breaks up the action. It is not necessary, but they're just going to do it anyways. I would much rather have them ride out until the $1 million winner is claimed, but I guess that's fine. It's totally fine. But this is how the all-star format works regardless. Like I said, I think it's much better than what we saw last year. So that's the All-Star format. Now here are my predictions for the All-Star Open. This is purely based on a gut feeling and what I know of these drivers' history at Texas Motor Speedway. Winning Stage 1, my opinion, is going to be Austin Dillon. He's really good at Texas, has won there before, so he's going to be my Stage 1 winner. Stage 2, I think, is going to go to Daniel Suarez. Also has some pretty good stats at Texas, and I also think with the field dwindled down a little bit, it will give him a chance to shine. Now, the race winner, I actually think will be Eric Jones. Of course, he's had a lot of momentum. He will be a really good contender to win the race, if not in Stage 1 and Stage 2, at least to win at Stage 3 and get himself into the Open. Now, for the fan vote, I think that's going to go to Tyler Reddick. He's a very likable guy. I think regardless, he's going to win the fan vote in general. Maybe Suarez would win the fan vote, but I think Suarez can at least race his way in. Tyler Reddick, I'm not sure if he can or not. Of course, he's been very strong this season, but Texas and him, I don't think are exactly best friends. And compared to the other drivers that I already mentioned, they have better stats at Texas than Reddick does. So those are the 4 drivers I think are going to get into the main event: Austin Dillon, Suarez, Jones, and Reddick. Now for the All-Star Crew win, for the Pit Crew Challenge, I totally think this is going to go to Kyle Busch. I had a stat already prepared when I was starting to write this show last week, but this week Kyle Busch's crew actually broke another record, getting the first pit stop under 9 seconds of the season. So it's very, very impressive from them. I think they're going to be a true contender to fight for the Pit Crew Challenge this weekend. And then to win the whole thing, I actually think the winner of the $1 million is going to go to Ross Chastain. He's been very strong this season. Not only that, but he's willing to do what it takes to win the $1 million. He has not made friends this season. No need to make any more at the All-Star race. So Ross Chastain, I think, is going to win the $1 million this weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. So what are your all-star predictions? Let me know in the comments below. And with that, we are done with this episode of Above the Yellow Line, the show where we talk all about the NASCAR Cup Series. To find more content from us, make sure you follow me on social media at _TaylorKitchen_ on Twitter for post-race polls and daily questions, and Above the Yellow Line on Instagram and YouTube for teasers on our upcoming projects and more options to get in on the conversation. Also, make sure to check out TobyChristieCom on all social media platforms to find great motorsports content, and TobyChristie.com to hear and read more from your favorite teams and drivers. Last but not least, I gotta give a huge shout out to SRI Performance, PFC Brakes, Rhino.co, and DoorDash for supporting Above the Yellow Line and all of us here at TobyChristie.com. All of our social pages linked in the description below, but before you do that, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel. We are very close to 1,000 followers, and once we get that, we're going to do a big giveaway, so make sure you help us reach that number. Share this video with your friends and family, and guys, thank you so much for supporting us here at Above the Yellow Line, and until next time, I'll see ya.